The world had forgotten its creator. Violence was law, corruption was the norm, and the earth groaned under the weight of its wickedness. Men no longer feared justice. They bowed to idols of greed, power, and desire. The strong devoured the weak, and the cries of the innocent were drowned in the laughter of the wicked. It was an age of giants, mighty beings called the Nephilim, offspring of fallen ones and mortals. They ruled as kings and warlords, shaping the world with blood and terror. Men sold their souls for power, and the earth, once a paradise, became a graveyard of its own making. And yet, in the midst of this darkness, there was one man, Noah, an old man by the measure of men, but not broken. His hands, calloused from years of labor, still built with purpose. His voice, weary but strong, still prayed to a God no one else believed in. They mocked him for it. "The gods of war and wealth have given us everything," they sneered. "But your God, where is he?" Noah did not answer. He only watched. He saw what others refused to see, the world spiraling toward its own destruction. Then one night, the heavens spoke, a voice, not of man nor beast, but of something greater. It was not thunder, yet it shook the earth. It was not fire, yet it burned within his soul. "Noah." He fell to his knees. The voice surrounded him as if the air itself had come alive. "The earth is filled with violence. Every thought of man is evil. I will erase them from the face of the world." Noah trembled. He had seen judgment in men's eyes before, but this was different. This was not a mere war, not a plague or a famine. This was the end. "All of them," Noah whispered. "All." A pause. "But you have walked with me." A great weight pressed upon his heart, heavy as a mountain. He was only a man. How could he stand before a storm meant to sweep the world away? Then, the impossible command: "Build an ark." The vision came, a ship unlike anything ever seen. Wood, cut from trees that had stood for centuries. Rooms upon rooms, vast enough to house the remnants of the world. A floating sanctuary in a world about to drown. "But Lord, I am an old man." No answer. "The world will call me mad." Still, silence. He closed his eyes. He knew the answer already. He had known it before the words left his lips. Faith was not about understanding, it was about obeying. When the voice faded, the night felt darker, colder. The stars overhead blinked like distant, unfeeling eyes. Noah rose, and then he took his first step. The first step toward an ark that would take decades to build. The first step toward a storm unlike any the world had ever seen. The first step toward the day when the earth would be washed clean, and he alone would remain to tell its story. The first tree fell with a thunderous crack. Noah wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands raw from the axe. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, dragged the heavy logs through the dirt, their muscles straining beneath the relentless sun. Day after day, year after year, the forest shrank, and in its place, something began to rise. A ship. No, not a ship, an ark. A structure so massive, so unnatural, that it seemed to defy reason itself. The wood stretched high into the heavens, beams layered upon beams, rooms carved from the very bones of the earth. A city upon itself, built not upon land or sea, but upon faith alone. And faith, the people said, was madness. At first, they merely watched. Travelers paused on their journeys, staring in confusion at the monolithic structure. Some whispered, others laughed. Then the taunts began. "Where is your flood, Noah? Perhaps your God is sleeping." The laughter grew louder. More came, men and women from distant villages, drawn by the absurdity of the sight. They came in droves, not to believe, but to mock. Familiar faces twisted in cruelty. Old friends shook their heads. "Noah, you were once wise," they pleaded. "You were a man of reason. What happened to you?" But Noah did not answer. For decades the sound of hammer and chisel echoed across the valley. And for decades the voices of the doubters grew sharper. And then came the prophets, not of God, not of truth, but of deception. They stood before the crowds, their robes flowing, their voices thick with honeyed words. "Noah is cursed," they declared. "He builds in vain." The people nodded. They wanted to believe it. They needed to believe it. And then the whispers came from within Noah's own house. "What if we're wrong?" Noah turned to see Japheth staring at the ark, his face unreadable. "What if we built this for nothing?" Shem's voice was barely above a whisper. Even his wife, the woman who had stood by him through every storm of life, hesitated before she spoke. "We have given up everything," she said. "And for what?" Noah did not reply. What could he say? For even in his own heart, a whisper had begun to grow. What if the rain never comes? What if God has abandoned me? And then, on a night when the stars burned red against the sky, a stranger arrived. He wore tattered robes, his feet bare, his eyes hollow, as if he had stared into the abyss itself. He moved with the stillness of the grave, his voice softer than the wind. "You are a fool, Noah." The word sent a chill through his bones. "Do you not see?" the stranger continued, his lips barely moving. "The sky is clear. The rivers still flow. The world goes on, as it always has, and you have wasted your life." Noah clenched his fists, but the stranger only smiled. What kind of God speaks and then falls silent? A silence stretched between them. For the first time in all the years of building, Noah felt something stir inside him. Doubt. The stranger leaned in, his breath cold against Noah's ear. "There will be no flood." And then he was gone. Noah stood alone in the shadow of the ark, his heart hammering in his chest. Then a gust of wind tore through the valley, howling like a beast awakened from its slumber. The trees bent, the earth trembled, and in the sky, a single cloud. Noah fell to his knees. The sign had come. It began with silence, a silence so deep, so unnatural, that even the wind dared not whisper. Noah paused, his hands resting on the wooden frame of the ark. The world had been alive with mockery just yesterday, jeers, laughter, voices raised in scorn. But now, nothing. The trees stood still. The birds once chattering from the branches had vanished. The air itself felt heavy, thick with something unseen. Then the ground trembled. A low, distant rumble, as if the earth itself had begun to stir. Noah turned, and that's when he saw them. They came, from the hills, the forests, the rivers, and the skies. 2 by 2, lions, their golden manes rippling as they strode side by side with lambs. Snakes slithered over rocks, undeterred by the fluttering wings of doves that danced above them. Elephants moved like living mountains, their footfalls shaking the ground. Giraffes stretched their long necks, their wide eyes filled with something not quite fear, not quite understanding. Above them, the sky darkened as thousands, tens of thousands of birds circled, their wings a whispering tide against the heavens. The people gathered, their laughter strangled in their throats. This can't be real," someone whispered. A woman fell to her knees, pressing her hands into the dirt, as if the ground beneath her might suddenly vanish. A man, once among Noah's most bitter mockers, staggered backward. His lips trembled, but no words came. One by one, the villagers looked to Noah. For the first time, the questions in their eyes were not laced with ridicule. What if he was right? Noah did not gloat. He did not boast. He simply watched as the animals moved, as if pulled by an invisible hand, toward the massive wooden structure that had cost him a lifetime of labor. He turned to his family. Bring them inside. Shem and Japheth guided the creatures up the ramp, their steps cautious but firm. Ham, his hands shaking, reached out as a tiger passed within inches of him. It didn't snarl, didn't snap. It simply obeyed. But not all who watched were in awe. Some, many, were afraid. And fear, when left unchecked, rots into something far worse. Rage. A murmur spread through the crowd. It twisted and grew, turning into a chorus of anger, panic, denial. This is witchcraft! Noah has cursed us! We've been deceived. The murmurs became shouts. The shouts became roars. A mob formed, fists clenched, eyes burned with fury. They surged forward, pressing toward the ark, their hands reaching for Noah, for the beams of the ship, for anything they could grasp and destroy. Noah, stop this madness! Someone shrieked. Call them back! Noah stepped forward, his weathered face set in stone. He raised his hands, not in defense, not in anger, but in a final plea. Turn back to God, he said, his voice steady. There is still time. A young man, barely past his youth, threw a stone. It struck Noah's arm, but he did not flinch. The door will close soon, he continued. You must choose. Now. More shouts, more stones. But through it all, Noah did not waver. The sky rumbled. A gust of wind howled through the valley, bending the trees, whipping dust into the air. The people faltered, their voices swallowed by the rising storm. And then, in the chaos, a laugh broke through. A single laugh, cold, sharp, dripping with mockery. A man stepped forward, his lips curled into a sneer. You've wasted your life, old man. He spat at the ground. You and your pathetic ark. He turned to the crowd, lifting his hands. There is no flood. The people hesitated. The storm churned above them. Noah bowed his head. A tear slipped down his cheek, though no one saw it. For he knew that before the storm ended, that same man's voice, along with all the others, would not be heard ever again. A single drop of rain. It struck the dry earth, vanishing in the dust. Noah stood at the entrance of the ark, his breath held. The wind had stilled, the air thick with an unbearable weight. Then, another drop. A child in the crowd gasped as it landed on his cheek. He wiped it away, staring at his fingers as if he had touched something foreign, something impossible. Another, and another. The first few raindrops were small, timid, barely noticed amidst the growing tension. But Noah knew. He knew. The sky rumbled, deep and slow, as if the heavens themselves were waking from an ancient slumber. Then, the sky cracked. A roar unlike anything ever heard shook the valley. Not mere thunder, but something deeper, more primal. The clouds, dark as judgment, twisted and churned. And then, the sky opened. Water fell, not in drops, not in streams, but in torrents. A curtain of rain, heavy and violent, hammering the earth with an unrelenting fury. The crowd gasped, shielding their faces as the wind howled. Clothes clung to soaked skin. The ground beneath them turned to mud. And then, the earth broke. A deafening crack split the air, and from the ground itself, water burst forth. Geysers exploded from beneath their feet, spewing fountains of water into the sky. The rivers swelled, overflowing their banks in mere moments. Valleys became lakes. Fields became seas. Screams, not laughter, not mockery, screams. The people who had jeered, who had spit at Noah and called him a fool, now clawed at one another in terror. Noah stepped backward, into the ark. His sons pulled at the great door, heaving with all their strength. The hinges groaned, wood scraping against wood. The rain drowned out their grunts of effort, but the door moved. The people saw, and they ran. They slammed their fists against the ark's sides. "Noah, open the door! Please, we were wrong!" A woman threw herself at the threshold, fingers digging into the wood, her face contorted with desperation. "Noah, I have children," she sobbed. "They don't deserve this." More bodies pressed forward, fists pounding, nails clawing. The water rose. It swirled around their ankles, then their knees. Then a wave surged through the valley, swallowing those too slow to run. A man clung to a tree as the floodwaters raged beneath him. He had been one of the loudest mockers, the one who had spat at Noah's feet. Now his screams were lost in the storm. The ark shuddered as the water lifted it from the earth. The door was sealed. Inside, Noah's family huddled together, their breaths ragged, their bodies trembling. Not from cold, but from the weight of what was happening beyond those thick wooden walls. A moment passed, then another. Noah hesitated, his fingers brushing against the wood. Slowly he leaned forward, pressing his eye against a small crack in the door. Through it he saw a hand outstretched, fingers grasping, shaking, slipping beneath the waves, and then gone. Noah closed his eyes. The ark rose, carried by the wrath of the storm. The world was no more. Silence. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of rest, but the silence of the end. The ark drifted on an ocean without shores, without islands, without edges. Only water. It stretched endlessly, swallowing the sky, merging with the horizon in a vast, empty void. The world Noah had known, the villages, the forests, the laughter, the voices, gone. Inside, the ark groaned as the waves cradled it, rocking gently, a stark contrast to the chaos that had birthed this new world. No one spoke. Shem sat against the wooden walls, his fingers running over the grain, tracing patterns that no longer mattered. Ham stared at the dim light filtering through the cracks in the wood, his lips slightly parted, as if waiting for a sound that would never come. Japheth held his wife close, their hands intertwined, gripping each other as though letting go would cast them into the abyss. Noah stood alone. He listened, not to the creaking of the ark, not to the quiet breathing of his family, but to the ghosts of voices lost to the flood. They still screamed in his mind, still pounded on the door, still gasped for breath that would never return. He had obeyed. He had done as commanded. And yet, had he done enough? Had he pleaded hard enough? Had he built fast enough? Had he failed them? A hand touched his shoulder. His wife. She didn't speak. There was nothing to say. But her touch was warm, and in the vastness of this cold new world, it was enough. Noah exhaled. He turned his gaze upward. "Lord," he whispered, "what now?" The days blurred together. Time became a meaningless thing upon an ocean without landmarks. The animals stirred restlessly in their enclosures. His family carried on with quiet obedience, tending, feeding, waiting. But waiting for what? Noah climbed to the highest point of the ark. He squinted at the sky, searching for something, anything. Then, an idea. He reached into a small wooden cage and withdrew a bird, a raven. Its dark feathers shone, its wings twitching with restless energy. Noah whispered a silent prayer and released it. The raven soared into the sky, circling, rising higher and higher until it was a mere speck against the gray. Then, it vanished. Noah waited, and waited, But the raven did not return. His heart sank. Days passed. The waters did not recede. The silence stretched. Then he tried again. This time, a dove. It fluttered from his hands, lifting into the sky, its white wings cutting through the mist. Noah watched it go, his pulse steady, his heart heavy. And again he waited. Hours passed. The sky darkened. Noah swallowed the lump in his throat, ready to accept another failure. Then, a flutter of wings. The dove returned, in its beak a leaf. Noah inhaled sharply. He held out his hand, trembling as he took the tiny branch. A leaf, not water, not void, not nothingness. Land. The ark drifted no longer. It came to a slow, shuddering stop, its great wooden belly scraping against something solid. The rain had ceased, the air clearer than it had been in weeks. Noah descended to the great doors of the ark. His sons gathered behind him. His wife took his hand. He breathed in deep, steadying himself. Then, with one final push, the doors creaked open. The sunlight poured in. The world reborn. I hope you've enjoyed this retelling of the story of Noah's Ark. Before you go, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more incredible Bible stories brought to life. I've put a link on the screen to another Bible story I think you might like, so I hope you'll join me to continue the journey. May God bless you today.